This is a Hope 1032 podcast.
As followers of Jesus, in whom all things were made, we acknowledge the Darug people as the traditional custodians of the country on where this podcast is recorded. We recognise their continuing connection to the land and waters and thank them for protecting this land and its ecosystems since time immemorial. We pay our respects to elders past, present and future, and we extend that respect to all First Nations peoples listening today. Hello there. Keep listening, because at the end of this episode, I may have a little treat for you.
And so I've had couples say to me, 5-6 years ago, we thought, well, yeah, we'll just be a childless couple, but it just keeps on coming back. And I say, did you ever officially mourn and grieve what you have given up? And they said, no, not really. And so one couple, I said, look, you really need to draw a line in the sand and actually together step over it. And they took me literally. They actually went down to the beach. They drew a line in the sand. They held hands this side. They prayed. They wept. They let go of everything that they were leaving, and they handed it over to God. And then they stepped over that line into their new life. And they said that was the moment when they could actually start grieving, so that they could then start moving on with their life. That's how you move on.
I'm Georgia, and welcome to Finding Hope, the podcast that reminds you of the good in the world. Each episode, we tell the story of someone who has found real hope in difficult times and made the world a bit of a better place along the way. Episode 68, Sheridan Voysey. Sheridan is a broadcaster, speaker and author of 9 books, including his latest work, Praying Through Infertility, which is a book written by men and women who have faced infertility themselves, a journey which Sheridan and his wife Merryn have walked through. Sheridan is also no stranger to the microphone. He currently hosts Pause for Thought on BBC 2 in the UK, where he now lives with his wife and his very cute dog, Rupert. But he's actually formerly the presenter of Open House here on Hope 1032. It's an honour to welcome Sheridan back into the building today, all the way from the UK. I'm choosing to believe you came here for this podcast.
Just for you, Georgia. Just for you.
So honoured to be speaking to you. Thank you so much for being here.
So nice to have this time together.
Sheridan, I want to talk about a lot of things. Like I said to you before this episode, if I had my way, I could talk for like 10 hours, but I'm not going to do that.
I'm up for it.
I thought we could talk about relationships, because I feel like that encompasses a lot of your life, your journey, your work as well. How do you cultivate relationship in your life? I can imagine that can be particularly hard not having kids, because so much of people your age is based around that family unit, that kind of nuclear family. How do you intentionally form relationships?
So let me take you to a little seminar room in Sydney in 2008. And my wife and I are sitting in this seminar listening to a very straight-talking seminar leader tell us all of what would be involved if we were to go forward with fostering and adoption, which is what we were looking at that point. And she was telling us, look, there's so many blessings in doing that, but it's also going to be very difficult too. What are you going to do when the little girl that you've adopted won't hug you because of her attachment issues? What are you going to do when the little boy who you've fostered is punching holes in your wall because of his pent-up anger because of what he's gone through? You're going to need a support group around you. And then she said this. She said, who can you call at 2:00 in the morning when everything has gone wrong? And that was the catalyst for me getting intentional about just your question about how to cultivate relationships, because my pen hovered over my workbook and I wasn't too sure who to write in. And it wasn't that I didn't have friends, but I was only like 2 years into living in Sydney by that stage. I had friends in Brisbane, I had friends in Perth. But even then, Sheridan, how intentional were you being about cultivating those friendships? And so that got me on a journey of being intentional about cultivating relationships. Started with putting their birthdays in my diary, so at least I could remember and to celebrate the birth, the genesis of their existence, right? And then beyond that, it has gone to what is now another project we can talk about called Friendship Lab, where it's all about how do we be intentional about friend making and friend deepening. And I can give you just 3 little quick tips.
Please.
Check-ins, catch-ups, and meetups. A check-in is a quick little text. Hey, Dave, how you doing? Are you feeling better now? A catch-up is a phone call. It can be on video or whatever. Hey, Dave, I'm calling for no other reason than to find out how you're doing. And a meetup is then when you get together and you have dinner, you have coffee or whatever. Some of us will say, I don't have time for friendships right now. I don't have time for relationships. You have 10 seconds for a check-in. I'm sure you've got 10 minutes for a catch-up. And then you make the time for that meetup because that's how you develop your friendships.
It's so important. My next question is going to be, what does relationships mean to you now? What when you think of relationship, what do you think of?
Relationship is that it's the essence of who we are as human beings. In our DNA is to be related to other people. It's a very strange quirk of our modern era that over the last couple of 100 years we've somehow thought that the individual can last alone. And really it's actually that in the history of humanity, it's really in the last couple of 100 years that we've thought that individuals can go it alone. That's when individualism was born through the Enlightenment, and then we've kind of taken that on, and even in church circles, we've kind of sometimes got a God and me thing. I'm all fine, it's just Jesus and me, I don't need other people around me. Absolutely wrong. So we are built for relationship, and yet it doesn't come naturally. And in fact, there are forces to stop us from having relationship. There is selfishness in me when I might want something more from you than what you can give. Or maybe I don't like the way that you didn't affirm me when I really wanted to be affirmed, when actually you needed to call me out on something. All of those things mean that relationship is both incredibly necessary and also quite difficult. But we don't really spend too much time intentionally thinking about how to make it work. So relationship for me it's the essence, really, of life. And all the research will bear that out, Georgia. You can have all the money, we know you can have all the goodies and all the resources, and we know that your well-being and your sense of depression and your sense of anxiety, your well-being will be down, your anxiety and depression will be up if you do not have just a handful of very close friends. Yeah,
so important. I want to talk about probably the most important relationship as Christians, but one that we may, put by the wayside for various reasons, your relationship with God, Sheridan. And a way to obviously cultivate a relationship with God is through prayer, but it can be really hard to, number one, believe in prayer when things are going really, really tough, but also to actively pray, to be intentional about praying when you feel like you can't even form the words. What's your relationship to prayer like?
Well, I'm hardly any great model because, hey, Georgia, in this role, right, we've both been in it where we've been able to speak to some of the great saints of old and of modern life too, and be able to hear from the great prayers. So I learn as much as I try to pass on. But there is something about an unhurried relationship with God, which I think is key for us today, because we are so kind of formed in a busy society, in an instant society. Press a button and I can watch the whole series of anything that I want on Netflix. And we're just used to instantaneous presence, instantaneous benefit, which then carries on into our prayer life when we have instantaneous demand for God to come through for us. That he is there at any one moment. Now, we know he is there at any moment, but let's remember who's God and who's the little created being, right? But there is something about an intentionally unhurried relationship with God. For me, there's a couple of ways in which that kind of plays out. Is that for me, every morning, I have a little chair just in our spare room. It's nothing special. I don't have any special little icons set up in the corner. It's nothing particularly holy about it. But it's my place where I go and I sit and be present before God and just almost get my to-do list from him during that day and check it out. And I just know, oh gosh, I've actually got like 10 or 11 things that I've got to do today. What can I let go of? And it's amazing how much the Lord will, just say, what, that one's probably a lesser priority for today, isn't it? And that one there. How about if we just focus on these three? And so I bring my work life to him and I start off in a very unhurried way. And it happens every single morning, not because I'm particularly holy, but because I'm particularly needy. That's all it is. That's all it is. And then there are other spiritual practices that are a part of prayer. I'm a big journaler. Now, first thing that people tell me when they hear about journaling, they say, oh, I tried that and I couldn't keep it up. And I say, well, what do you mean you didn't? Yeah, well, you're supposed to do it every day, aren't you? And I say, no, No, your journal is your tool. You are the master. It's your servant. I will go months without putting in anything in my journal. Other days I'll write every day for weeks on end. Mm-hmm. But a journal is that way in which you can get it off your mind and onto the paper so that somehow it becomes objective. And that way the problem that you had somehow just becomes a little lighter. And that I will often quite physically lift my journal up to God and say, okay, Lord, I still need your work on this. I still need your hand on this. I really need it. But if it's in my mind and my heart all the time, somehow it's more of a burden. Writing it out also helps you to see where God's already worked in your life. And you start to see, oh, yeah, you've joined that dot with that dot, and here we are now. That's a really important one. And then third, if I can just throw that in, would be something called the breath prayer. And you can do a Google search on this, Sheridan Voysey breath prayer. I wrote this during the pandemic. It's turned out to help a lot of people. The funny thing is, Georgia, I found myself Googling myself to find it again, to use it.
I can't remember it.
The amount of times. Yeah. And so the breath prayer is based on a wonderful passage of Scripture, Galatians 5, where it talks about the Holy Spirit of God comes and brings us love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, self-control, long-suffering, perseverance. And I need those qualities every day. They are also, by the way, the essence of friendship and relationship, all of those qualities. We're going to need those qualities for each other if we're going to be good friends. I'm going to stretch your patience sometimes, all right? So you're going to need to be patient with me. And I'm going to need kindness for you sometimes when maybe it's a difficult time. So the breath prayer is just a very simple prayer practice in which you breathe in, Lord, I breathe in your love, and I release my anxiety, my insecurity, and I breathe in your peace, and I release my anxiety, and I breathe in your joy and release on my unhappiness. It's just a very helpful prayer exercise, actually, to just be present before God, to receive everything he has for us, and actually, hopefully, become more human in the process.
Yeah, I love it. And we'll actually link that one in the show notes because I believe it's published on our website and we know the exact prayer. It's absolutely gorgeous. Moving on to your and your wife's journey through infertility, was watching an interview this week where you were talking about these unanswered prayers for a child for such a long time. And there was a phrase that you used that it picks away at your DNA, which I thought was just heartbreakingly accurate. Did you stop believing in prayer at any point during that time? Or was there points where you just absolutely, could not pray?
The nuance of your wording is important. Never stopped believing in prayer, had times where we just couldn't pray.
Yeah.
So there were times where we didn't even want other people to pray for us. Proverbs 13:12 says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. I think we all know that verse. And it's very true. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. There is a burden of hope sometimes when you are hoping for something and it doesn't come over the long term. It makes the heart sick. It's actually really true. And so there were times where we had this wonderful Friday night prayer group, and we called ourselves the Croydon Centre for Spiritual Enlightenment.
It's quite wordy.
Is it? Just a little bit. It was this joke, and it was kind of poking a bit of a tongue at New Ages, and there's a Croydon Centre for Spiritual Enlightenment because we met in Croydon, in Sydney, and we would meet together. And the beauty of that group was that we were able to be honest enough and say, you know what, we don't want you to pray for this tonight. Because what happens when you pray? Your expectation goes up. What happens the next 28 days later? You come crashing down with disappointment. So if every month everybody's praying for you and you've got the expectation up, and every month you come crashing down, you try doing that over 6 months. You try doing that over 12 months. You try doing that over 10 years, and you find your DNA being picked away. What is wonderful is when you've got a group of people around you who are so secure in their faith that when you say, guys, please, we just can't handle it this week, they will actually say, that's fine. Anything else we can pray about for you? It's not the only thing in your life. We will be your prayer for you. We will take that on. You don't have to pray about that. We will pray that for you. Yeah. Remember in Mark chapter 2, there's this wonderful story where there's a bunch of friends and they take their friend who is crippled and they try and take him to Jesus, and the place where Jesus is speaking is absolutely crowded. So they jump onto the roof, dig a hole, lower their friend down before Jesus. They're that tenacious. what does Jesus say? He looks at the guy. He doesn't actually respond to the guy's own faith. We don't even hear about him praying. But in response to the faith and the prayers of their friends, of his friends, he says, get up, take your mat and walk. And we all need to both have friends and also be those kinds of friends for other people when we can't pray. It's just too hard. I've lost hope. Not to get too concerned, oh, they're losing their faith. No, just to come alongside and say, I'll be your prayer for you in this moment, Georgia. That's what we need.
Yeah, that's so important. And I feel like, when you're in the depths of that despair, I think sometimes as Christians we don't know what to do. So we're like, oh, can we pray for you? Can we pray for you? As a way to almost like, I don't know, pacify themselves.
Yes.
Yep. So important.
It's a way of getting out of awkwardness sometimes.
Yes. Yep. Thoughts and prayers. Sheridan, let's talk about this journey of infertility. I know that you've spoken about it extensively over the past years, but for those of you who aren't aware of your journey, how did you and your wife come to know that you weren't able to have children naturally? How did that journey start for you?
Well, for us, it started with a conversation in the kitchen some years ago now, and Merryn walked into the kitchen and said, honey, I think it's time. And I said, time for what? She said, time we started a family. I said, what, right now? Fantastic, let's go. And, any couple who makes that decision, for the next 28 days, there is that expectation. And it's very, very common for the next couple of months in which the expectation is met with disappointment. That's just very common. And then often after that, the third month, fourth month, expectation is met with excitement. Well, 9 months of expectation and disappointment, we decided to go and get some tests done. The test revealed there was a problem on my side, and that without some sort of divine intervention or technological assistance, our dreamt of child would be hard to have. And we never knew that was the beginning of what would ultimately become a 10-year journey of trying all sorts of things. Not always consistently. There were a couple of times a couple of years where we would just kind of not do anything, and we come back to it, and the maternal or paternal drive kicks in, and it becomes an issue again. And we tried IVF, we tried healing prayer, we tried special diets, we tried special supplements. We also went on the adoption list, as I'd earlier mentioned. Nothing happened. Nothing worked. And it got to the point where towards the end of that 10 years, we thought we would do as many rounds of IVF again, just to see if this would work. And it came down to we had one embryo left, and we'd already decided if this didn't result in a viable pregnancy, then we were moving on as a childless couple. And would you believe that it was on that embryo that we received the news we'd completely given up expecting to hear, which was that we were pregnant. And there was jubilation amongst our family and friends and celebration, and everybody saying, wow, praise God, isn't that just like God? He comes through at the 11th hour, just at the last minute. And then on Christmas Eve of all days, we received another phone call, and it was from the IVF clinic saying, I'm so sorry, but you're not pregnant. The IVF drugs had created a gestational sac, but there was no baby in the sac, and the doctors had been fooled. And with that, Merryn put the phone down, curled up in a fetal position on our bed, and that's where our 10-year dream of having a child ended. So that's the story as to how it all began and how it ended.
Talk me through the aftermath of that. That after that decision had been made, you're like, this is it. We've come to the end of the journey. How do you move forward from there?
You let go of the symbols of your broken dream. So we had made the decision, if this didn't result in a pregnancy, we would move on as a childless couple. We'd made that decision. And then the problem with infertility, there's many problems, but one of the challenges with it is that it is a grief without a death. With everything else, there's some sort of finite end. With infertility, it's not. It's what they call a floating grief. And so every 28 days, you've got it again, if you know what I mean. And if you don't actually draw a line and officially bring that journey to an end, or officially bring that dream, put the dream to death, if you like, actually bury it, it can be perpetually in the back of your mind. Oh, I wonder whether we should start again. Maybe we should try adoption again. You can never move on if you've got it perpetually in the back of your mind saying, maybe again. Maybe if you just waited a little bit longer, the phone call would come. Maybe if you just tried one more embryo, it would work. You cannot move on like that. So we had already decided that was it, but there was a key moment, which when I look back on it now, I realize how key it is when we let go of all our baby stuff. Because if you'd walked into our house in Five Dock in Sydney, if you had walked into the kitchen, you would have seen a pram, a high chair, and, all of these things all ready to go. If you'd opened up the bottom drawers, you would have seen the cutesy little utensils and the bibs. And if you'd walked into one of the other rooms, you would have found a play rug, you would have found a porta cot. If you'd gone into our bedroom and opened up the doors to the wardrobe, you would have found some cutesy little, baby clothes and things. And we had the books. We had it all ready to go. And it was really important when my sister-in-law announced around about the same time that she was pregnant. Funnily enough, these things happen to happen at the same time, don't they? She then came around, opened up the boot, and we packed her car full of all of these baby things. They could use them. Yeah. We couldn't. And Merryn would say, actually, that as she drove off up the hill, round the corner, and out of sight, that there was a sense of which, it's done. Mm. Because if you hold on to those symbols, you're keeping it alive, and you can never move on. And so I've had couples say to me, 5-6 years ago, we thought, well, yeah, we'll just be a childless couple, but it just keeps on coming back. And I say, did you ever officially mourn and grieve what you have given up? And they said, no, not really. And so one couple, I said, look, you really need to draw a line in the sand and actually together step over it. And they took me literally. They actually went down to the beach. They drew a line in the sand. They held hands this side. They prayed. They wept. They let go of everything that they were leaving, and they handed it over to God. And then they stepped over that line into their new life. And they said that was the moment when they could actually start grieving so that they could then start moving on with their life. That's how you move on.
Sheridan, let's talk about this book, this brand new book, Praying Through Infertility. Just so thrilled that it's out there in the world because I read in the description that it's not advice, but it's accompaniment. And I love that phrase, accompaniment through the long, dark night that you're walking through. And it's not like you have just written this entirety yourself. It's stories of men and women who have walked through similar journeys. Has it been healing for you to connect with these people through writing this book and just knowing that you're not alone? It can be such an isolating experience.
It's been a transformative journey. So Merryn and I shared our story in a book called Resurrection Year, which is now 10 years old. And you know what? To this day, I still get emails from people sharing me the most profound stories as to how that book has helped them. So when the publishers actually approached me about this idea of doing Praying Through Infertility, I kind of thought, you know what, I've kind of done that. I think we've done as much as we can share, and we've shared as much as we can share, and we've done as much as we can do. And then I remembered, you know what, Resurrection Year has connected me with people right around the world who I reckon with a bit of coaching have got some important stories to share and important lessons to pass on to other people. And when I realized this could be a collaborative project, that's when the light switched on that maybe this was my project to do. So 37 contributors from 10 different countries, a multitude of different ethnicities and racial backgrounds. And because of that, they bring a nuance to this topic that I could never have brought myself. There's a Zimbabwean couple there that will talk not just about the pressure of their culture to have children, but the sense of stigma if you do not have children as a married couple. There is a sense in which you have been cursed by God. And they bring out some wonderful passages of scripture that prove that that cannot be the case. John the Baptist's mum and dad, Elizabeth and Zachariah. And it says that even though they were without children, they were righteous in the sight of God. Well, there you go. There goes that whole myth about you're struck down, you're cursed by God if you don't have children. There's a childless couple before they had John the Baptist, righteous in the sight of God. A variety of different people who are bringing all these nuances to this thing. I could never have brought that. So it has been profound to bring the tribe together, who I've kind of gotten to know over the last 10 years, and say, let's do something together for the couple that's probably about 2 years into the journey now. They know the pain of it. And they know that maybe this is going to last longer than what we thought. It's not just maybe 3 months of difficulty, which a lot of couples go through. No, it's now a serious endeavor. And we've got some things that only we can share with them. And that's what has resulted in Praying Through Infertility.
Fantastic. What have you learned throughout the book?
There are profound ways in which we can stay close to God even with the most difficult challenges. Each one of these people have been raw and honest with the challenges they've had faith-wise, but they've stayed in the room with God. That's been the key thing, I think. There's also just some really great stories. A guy that I met in the Philippines in 2006, and I remember somehow we got onto the topic that we were both wrestling with this. And then years later, I chased him up to find out just whether he would like to contribute to this book and how things had worked out for him and his wife. So this wonderful Filipino journalist named Edwin Estioko. And Edwin told me his story, and I said, that's got to be in the book. What he and his wife ended up doing was they both work for a child sponsorship organization. They had sponsored a child through their own organization, even though they work there. They had sponsored their own child. They went to meet her. They found that they fell in love with this little girl and her sister. They ended up formally adopting, actually informally, just to make that clear, but they ended up adopting that couple of girls into their home to come and live with them. But beyond that, they adopted one other person, their biological mother, who was young enough to be their sister, but then could come and live with them as well. So for the last 15 years, these people have all lived together in one joyful, noisy home, is his phrase. Isn't it great?
Gorgeous.
Now, I could never have written a story like that, but what an amazing story of adoption. Adoption of not just two children, but their biological mother as well. And they've all lived together as one family with chickens and dogs and... that is a redemptive story. Yeah. That is a redemptive story.
Oh, fantastic. I was so excited to read this book, and it will be available in the show notes on Sheridan's website. All of that you can check out after the episode as well. I'd love to know, Sheridan, just in general, how your infertility journey changed your relationship with those around you. Starting with your wife, Merryn, I can imagine that that's changed so much. How did it change your relationship with Merryn, whether it strengthened or just transformed in different ways?
So I can now say that I know beyond theoretically, but experientially, why couples can split up going through infertility. Merryn and I, thankfully, were never at that stage. But for the first time ever, there were times where we would sit and talk something through, even pray something through, and come away on different sides of the page. That had never happened to us before. Maybe one of us wanted to do IVF, the other one wanted to do adoption, we're going to get into the conversation of adoption. One wants to do overseas adoption, the other one wants to go local. One wants to stop IVF. One wants to keep on going. Before you know it, you just always have these differences. How do you bring those differences to be similarities? How do you work those things through? Again, we had to just stay in the room. And there were some times which one of us wanted to get up, slam the door, go into another room and just be done with this. I would have been happy if we had kind of ended our infertility journey easily 5 years earlier.
Right.
But you keep on kind of going. You learn to sacrifice for each other. Merryn was frustrated with me at one stage because I was trying to work out the ethics of IVF from a Christian viewpoint. That's not an easy thing to do. It's not as clear-cut as some might like to think. There were times where it was just too hard for me and I kind of let it slip for a while. And she said, well, while you're taking all this time trying to work out the ethics, I'm waiting. So there were times where we frustrated each other, where we challenged each other, couldn't get on the same page. But I can also tell you, Georgia, and this is the good news, that we are closer together as a result of going through that, because we stayed in the room, because we kept on praying together, because we kept on talking, kept on compromising. The amount of compromises that each of us made for the other. I'm going to sacrifice this so that you can have a chance to see this. I'm going to sacrifice my will so that you have a chance to give this a go. I think that's the essence of marriage, and I think that's the essence of how you can grow together through something as difficult as infertility.
Thank you so much for sharing that. What about your relationships with your friends, especially those who began to have children? How did they change? Did you find yourself having to become more intentional to spend time with them? Did you find like they would isolate kind of in that family unit and then you and Merryn were left on the outskirts?
You find 2 or 3 different things happening at once, and this is the really complex thing about friendships when you're in this situation. First off, all your friends are having children, you're not. So there's straight away this sense of comparison, and that can be difficult. Now, most of our friends were really sensitive to that, very, very mindful of what we didn't have that they did have. Some, I remember one particular situation where we drove to go and see some friends, and it was lots of friends over who had just had their children, and the whole afternoon was talking about nappy brands and all that stuff that you talk about. And, we had driven quite a long way to see them, and it felt really tough afterwards. It's just like that hurt. That you weren't mindful of somebody else in the room. And you realize actually that some of those relationships, some of those friendships, maybe they weren't as strong a friendship as you thought they might be. There are other people who are just so sensitive, to the point of being so sensitive, funnily enough, they could almost be offensive. In one case, one of our friends two of our friends actually, two separate friends, who were so conscious of the fact that they had what we didn't have, one person didn't let us know that she was pregnant again.
Oh, no, that's not.
And then when you find out,
it's double the hurt.
It's a strange situation. She was trying to be caring. Now the news was going to come out at some stage. She was trying to be caring of us. So we had to be mindful. You were trying to be caring of us. And another family did exactly the same thing. And when it was most difficult was when we had just maybe had some very close time with them. We'd been sharing all sorts of deep things from the heart. And then this most important thing they hadn't actually shared with us. There was a very important survey done in 1986 by Oxford University, and they surveyed people in the United Kingdom, Japan, Hong Kong, and Italy. So that's a really good broad range of cultures about what are the rules of friendship. I won't go all to the top 6 of them, but one of them you might not expect to be on the list, and that is not sharing good news with your friend. And withholding something important from your friend. And that's what had happened. They'd done it out of good heart, but it was actually really difficult. Others we found that weren't friends but could have become friends in church didn't invite us round for dinner because they were worried that seeing their kids would trigger us and everything like that. It's like, no, invite us. We need to be brought in.
Yeah.
We need to be brought in. Therein lies the genius of your question, Georgia. It's very complex. And so you have to have grace for each other. You have to try and keep the communication lines open. You have to try and forgive. But the best thing is you need to talk through these kinds of things with each other. So I'm grateful now, actually, that we're now at an age where most of those children are now kind of teenagers and everything, and actually the parents are having a little bit more time for their friends. So
their teens are like,
that's
goodbye. I don't want to spend time with you anymore.
But there's still times now, because they're in their teens, where I see the teenage daughter that I would have loved to have had.
Yeah.
Or I go around and have lunch with 3 generations of a beautiful Christian family, and I go, that's what we're not going to have. So you're reminded about it again. But it's kind of like a scar. You realize that one day you had a real gash there, and then it got healed over time. And occasionally it'll be bumped, and you realize, I've still got that there, but most of the time you don't actually realize it's there. The wound has healed. Occasionally it's bumped. You realize, that's right, it's still there.
Yeah. Let's talk about Friendship Lab. Please. I love this project that you've started because, as adults, it's so hard to make friends. It's so hard to keep friends. It's so hard to, as you said, know about the rules of friendship. I didn't even know there were rules. What prompted you to found this organisation, and what exactly is it?
Yeah. 2019. I knew that I had a big birthday coming up in another couple of years, which I know you can't believe, Georgia, right?
And I would never even guess.
Please don't. So I went away on retreat, and I was praying, Lord, what do I do for the next season of my life? Do I keep on doing what I've been doing, which has been actually really fruitful, or do I do something else? Long story short, by the end of that day, I really had this sense in which friendlessness needed to be the problem that I started to try and scratch. Went away thinking, I'll do what I normally do. I go and write a book on it. So I went and started researching this whole area of adult friendship and saw how it is the most overlooked and neglected relationship, an undervalued relationship that we have in our life. The whole of our culture, even in our churches, we talk about romance, we talk about parenting, we talk about family. That's great. We miss friendship. It's the most overlooked relationship we have. Some wonderful things happened during the next 12 months. I was able to get BBC Radio 2 to give a whole week to the whole topic of friendship, which is unheard of. You don't just rock on up the biggest broadcaster in the world and get them to do that. Read a little article for the Times of London, also got a good response. And I thought, okay, I'm onto the right thing here. By the end of the year, I had an outline for the book, went away on retreat, and I felt there was this handbrake on the project. It's, God, what is this? Is it opposition? Is it lack of confidence? What is it? What is it? And I really felt God say, you're thinking too small. You have been thinking about how to write a book on friendship and get it out there. What if you were to focus on the 25% of Brits and the 25% of Australians who have no close friends, and what it would take to reduce that 25% to 24, 23, 20, 15? What would that take? And you realize, well, a book is just never going to cut it. We're going to need media collaborations, arts collaborations, podcasts, courses. And so the Friendship Lab, the charity, basically had its genesis from that day. And 3 years later, we've now got this evidence-based, 6-session evidence-based course, which we piloted with a researcher from the University of Leicester, found that it actually really did bring some great results into people's lives. And we're kind of at the point of launching very soon, where we will help people to develop those skills that we never talk about. And there are a whole heap of micro skills that we've all missed. They've never been taught to us. We need them now because we've got a loneliness crisis, we've got a friendlessness crisis, but we can do something about that. It really is not hard. We just need to be wise about what we do, and we need to go back to a word we've talked about before, intentionality. Let's be intentional about it.
So important. I'd love to talk, before we move on from friendship, what did and you have already touched on this a little, what did your friends do for you during your period of infertility that was really helpful for you? We've talked about the things that maybe aren't so helpful, but if you think of a few experiences that stick out for you, I think it's be some good encouragement for those that might be walking a similar journey.
One of the best things that you can do as a friend of somebody who's walking through infertility is just be present for them. And that may well mean that you don't ask about how things are going. Sometimes actually it's really tiring to keep on having to answer where you're up to with your infertility thing. Sometimes your friend is ready and they need to talk about this. Other times they won't be ready and they just don't want to talk about it. The challenge for you as a friend is that you'll never know which day is which. The great thing that we can do as friends is just say, Sheridan, is this something you want to talk about today? Or do you want to talk about something else? That's a great gift when you actually leave somebody with that freedom to make the choice. And you say, you know what? Yeah, I could probably talk about that today. Or let's just talk about the U2 concert. Talk about something else completely. That's one of the best gifts. So it's not just coming on in with your little newspaper clippings that you found with a secret herb that somebody found in the far reaches of Southern America that apparently makes everybody fertile. All those things. All that stuff, Generally just assume that your friend probably knows a lot more about all of those remedies than you do. It's very nice, very touching that you're thinking about them, but sometimes when everybody's sending you links and everything, that's just overwhelming, because of course then you've got to get back to them about those links. You've got to say whether you read it or not, and that's just too much. Assume that your infertile friend is on top of all the medical aspects. But just be there. What do you need this week? Coffee? A game? Silence? Shall we go and shall we sit in the park for 15 minutes just being present to each other? That's the best thing you can do as a friend.
Yeah, I love that. I'd love to finish, Sheridan, by talking about your relationships, how you've cultivated relationships through your job. As you know, broadcasting, speaking, even, writing books, can be isolating at times, but very relational role. You're sharing people's stories, you're bearing witness to people's stories, you're sharing your own story. What do you find most compelling about hearing other people's stories, relating to them in that way?
Well, when we hear somebody else's story, we enter it in some kind of imaginative way. And this is the beauty about the power of story, is that you share your story. I may not share any of the details of which you've gone through it, but actually I will be able to connect with the emotional or the spiritual aspects of it. So somehow I enter your story with you when you share it. So it's something very special that we get to share our stories, and the more vulnerable short stories we share, obviously it's the closer relationship that we have. The issue when we're in broadcasting is that, of course, a lot of people come with an agenda to share a story that makes it look good, builds a profile, sells the book. I want to hopefully be present before you, and I'd love it. People go and get a copy of Praying Through Infertility for their friend or whatever. But even if they don't, that we've had a conversation that is going to enrich each other and enrich our listener, right? That's not always the case. So sometimes there is a veneer that we have to kind of crack through when it comes to the relational side of the broadcasting that we do. In many ways, sometimes this is a transactional space. It's not a space of friendship. You find out who your friends are in broadcasting when you leave it. And you find out, do they still want to keep on following you on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, or whether you've now served your purpose. And that happened to me when I left the open house show, and I saw a whole bunch of people that they're not following. That's right. I wasn't serving them anymore because I could be a conduit of their story and their information getting out. There are other people, however, of which the opposite was the case. And one is Adrian Plass, a wonderful British author who I interviewed him numerous times over the years at various different radio stations, the last ones being on the Open House program. And we're talking off air just at the end of what was coming to be our end of our 10-year journey through infertility. And he said, if you ever come to the UK, please look us up. Please come and visit us in the Yorkshire Dales. So when we moved to the UK, I sent him the email to see, let's see if he means it. And sure enough, he replied back saying, how about this date? How about this date? How about this date? We went up, drove up to North Yorkshire, to the wonderful rolling hills and dry stone walls and just, smoking chimneys. It's that kind of stuff, right?
Delightful.
It exists outside of Midsummer Murders. It really does. It really does. And we have this wonderful weekend with Adrian and Bridget, his wife, where we just unload the whole of our 10-year story with them, and they listen and they weep with us and they pray with us. And in the moment, that weekend was when Adrian said to me, you need to be writing this story into a book, which was ultimately the book called Resurrection Year. He spoke a word into us I couldn't serve him anymore. I wasn't broadcasting in the UK. Half of the crisis I felt, actually, when we left here for my wife to take up a job at Oxford University, going to the UK for the first few years, I didn't know who I was or what I was doing anymore. But he saw that even though I was no use to him anymore, he was a man of God and he saw somebody right in front of him he wanted to serve. So that's when you find out who the real friends are.
Yeah, so important. And that isolation doesn't just happen when you leave broadcasting. It's quite odd because it's almost like this one-way situation. You are broadcasting into, hundreds of thousands, millions of homes. And you're sitting in a studio alone, and it's like you might not talk to, I know for me, I'm on air for 4 hours a day. I might not talk to a single other human.
You're talking to a little piece of metal called a microphone. It's the weirdest thing.
It's bizarre. How do you kind of wrestle with that isolation? Is that something that you've had to, I'm guessing through COVID, it's something you've almost had to relearn how to deal with,
Well,
right?
since I left broadcasting in terms of hosting a show and then moved to the UK, I've been working from a home office for the last 12 years by myself in solitude. I don't mind that. I'm fine working in solitude, but you have to, again, be very intentional because otherwise you can just close in on yourself. So you have to get out, you have to have coffees, you have to go to conferences, you have to go to events. I get to speak a lot, so that's where I have a lot of my people stuff, is when you go and speak at a conference and you get a lot of people energy and drain with all of that. I love it to bits. But you've got to balance all of that, and you've got to make sure that you don't just lack time and so therefore make up time for friends, but actually make sure you've got the energy for friends as well. That's important. The two are not always correlated. Sometimes you can have the time, but you don't have the energy for other people.
How do you bring back the energy?
How do I fill the tank?
I'm asking that personally as much as I am professional.
Just, completely hypothetical in case there's somebody listening who happens to need that to know that too. Okay, Georgia, here's the answer for me. So for me, each of us finds our way of filling our tank. For me, funnily enough, solitude is part of that. But only after I've been intensely with other people. On this trip, I've spoken probably to about 1,500 people over a course of about 4 days. It's been wonderful. I've loved it. I needed to go and refresh. How did I do it? I went down, since we're speaking in Sydney, I went down to Sydney Harbour. I walked around the Opera House. I walked around the Botanic Gardens. I walked around the Domain. I went to the Art Gallery of New South Wales. That's how I can fill my tank. Spending time with friends is how you can fill your tank. The friends in whom it is okay to be silent in the room. That's actually a real test of friendship. I've only got a couple of friends like that. I'm an immense gap filler, Georgia. There's a silence there. I'm starting to get itchy, and maybe I need to talk about something. There's some friends in which it's okay. We can be standing out in nature, as I did with my friend Jason once, for a full 15 minutes, standing next to each other up in the north of England, listening to the bird calls, listening to the rustling of the leaves, listening to the trickling of the stream nearby, just taking it all in, God's beautiful creation. Those are life-giving things. Spending time with my wife is very, very life-giving. Right now, we've been apart for a couple of weeks. We're ready to be back together. So each of us have to find those things. For other people who are much more extroverted, it's going to be, I need to be with people. I need to go out and dance. I need to sing. You've got to find what it is, because that fills your tank so that you can be present with people when you gravitate towards them.
Yeah, I love that. Final question, Sheridan. It's been a delight having you on the show today. What do you hope people glean from hearing your story today?
Oh, gosh. Okay, here's what I hope people glean. The cleverness of God. The God who you may well be shaking your fist at because he isn't giving you what you want. The God who may be absolutely confusing you because all the theology you had in your mind is not working out the way you thought it would. The God who is disappointing you. The God who may be still paradoxically meeting you in some amazing ways and yet not kind of speaking into this one big area in your life that you wish you would move in. The cleverness of God to take that thing, to take that broken dream, to take that loss, that empty space in your life and do amazing things with it and through it. And that's what we have found, is that there has been something in which, as we have shared our childless journey with other people, it hasn't just helped childless couples. It's helped single people who wanted to be married. It's helped people who had the career dream come true and they lost it, or never had the career dream come true. It's helped a whole variety of people. That is where the great joy in life is helping people through your stuff. Somebody, a very wise soul listening to all of this, said, Sheridan, do you see what God is doing? The lack of a birth in your life is birthing life in others. And I thought, oh my goodness, I need to tweet that out. Isn't that good? But good. What about if the lack in our life, the empty space where the husband should be, the wife, the child should be, the career, or the dream, the music, the art should be, what if that very empty thing is the very thing God wanted to use as a channel for you to then bless other people? It might come about because you also share your story with other people, even if it's just one person, it's helpful. Maybe because you never share that story with anybody else, but it informs your offering to the world, the lessons that you shape and craft and give to people. It might form into artwork, it might form into songs, it might form to something, but that's where the life happens. That's where the real transformation happens, when you hand that empty space over to God and he uses it to bring profound transformation for other people. That's what I'd like people to know, the cleverness of God in taking those broken things and making them beautiful.
Sheridan Voysey, it has been an honour. Thank you so much for being on Finding Hope today.
Great to be with you, Georgia.
Thank you so much to Sheridan Voysey for sharing his story today. Praying Through Infertility is available now, and you can find more information at sheridanvoysey.com. You can also follow Sheridan on social media. He's most active on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter, and you can find that information in the show notes. I'm Georgia, and thank you for listening to this episode of Finding Hope. To help this podcast reach more people, you can subscribe and leave a review on your favourite podcast app, and share it with a friend who may need a bit of extra hope right now. I'll leave you with this verse. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Romans 12, verse 12. Next episode, join me as I sit down with Dr. Andrew Browning, a world-leading obstetrician who has saved tens of thousands of lives across the African continent as he aims to eradicate obstetric fistulas.
Childbirth in that circumstance is dangerous. I mean, one area where we work in Africa, because of that very situation, no hospitals, 1 in 12 women will die during their lifetime giving birth, just purely because there's no hospitals. So that's what Bibi found herself, that situation. She delivered the stillborn child and all those dead tissues came away and she was left with a large fistula, or a hole, fistula just means hole, between the bladder and the birth canal. So she was leaking urine continually.
He's a fascinating man. Join me then. Catch you next time. If you've made it this far, you deserve a little treat. And I can think of nothing better than offering you a chance to win a copy of Sheridan's latest book, Praying Through Infertility. As Sheridan said in this episode, it's not preachy, it's a companion for those going through this journey.
So for your chance to win a copy, either for yourself or a loved one, simply head to hope1032.com.au/win. That is hope1032.com.au/win. And that information is in the show notes. Giveaway closes Monday, the 15th of April, 2024.